and we're going to talk about, just briefly, about 2 recovery houses. We've not got any overheads. I don't do overheads. I can't handle them. In 1247, a place called Bethlehem opened its doors in the UK, and we call it Bedlam. But in 1247, it wasn't Bedlam. It was opened in 1247 as a priory by the Bethlemites. The Bethlemites were an order of monks who set up a church in Bethlehem. And the Bethlemites' main aim in Bethlehem was to collect money to support the church in Bethlehem. And in 1247, the Bethlemites, had a prior, an abbot, and a few other people. And they all wore a uniform, you know. And on that uniform was the Star of Bethlehem. And the clients that came into Bethlehem at that time all wore a uniform that had the Star of Bethlehem, exactly the same uniform as the prior, the monks, the staff, the patients wore the same. It was only in 1445 when Bethlehem was taken over by the city, the council. The Bethlemites lost Bethlehem then. That's when it became Bedlam. When it was taken over by a system. Up until 1445, it was the first recovery house. It was a house of recovery. And we've seen the same in history. Pinel in France. We've seen it with the York Retreat, where when they were established, they were places of recovery. And the York Retreat with their moral management, which we call, because we even have to reinvent everything, we now call psychosocial intervention, which is all moral management was when you actually look at it. But we run around as if psychosocial intervention is something new. Look what we've created. You know, it's nonsense. And it was run by the Quakers, again by the church. A community of interest, a community of recovery. And then, if you read the York Retreat's own publicity, it says, and in later years, we have adopted a more medical approach. In 1620, Nathaniel Lee, a restoration poet who was often incarcerated in Bethlehem Hospital, wrote, "They said I was mad. I said they were mad. Bastards, they outnumbered me." Many years ago in Birmingham, when I worked with John, we set up the first real crisis house as an alternative, run by service users, for service users. It's called Anamacara. And Anamacara, in 7 years of operation, had one incident, one reportable incident, where somebody took an overdose and told us 10 minutes later. 7 years. That was closed by the system. And the system put in its own recovery house, run by staff. guess how many incidents they've had? Well, dams cite more than one in its first year. Well, peer support's nothing new. And peer support is a way forward. But let's be aware of one thing around peer support. Social workers are governed by social work and social workers. They write the education programs. They write the standards. They govern their own body. Psychology writes their own standards, governs their own body. Nurses write their own standards through the Royal College, govern their own body. As does every profession except peer workers. We are governed by academics who write our courses, who have never used services, many of them. We are governed by policies and procedures that have nothing to do with peer work and everything to do with professional. Let us not do what we always do in services when we're moving down these roads. Let us not colonise with professionalism and with professional ideas that belongs to the service user. Because we have a long, unproud history of doing that, of turning things into something they were never meant to be. That's the danger we face in the journey to recovery. And we have 2 recovery houses at the moment. We have one on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides, which we can take a maximum of 3 people at a time in. And it's on a farm. Well, it's a croft, we call it. And on the croft, we have pigs and chickens and turkeys and ducks and quails, cats, dogs, children, you know, all these things that you need, you know, in a whole life system, I think. And our clients come there. And they come to live on the croft, and they also come to share time with our family. We live just up the road in another croft. And our clients don't pay to come. We don't bill the health board. We don't bill the families in Scotland. We take no money from anybody for that service. That service runs through our own contribution. Karen and myself give around, well, it's about 13% of our income as a company goes straight to the recovery house. And the reason we do that is dead simple. If I went to my health board and said, okay, we'll take money for this, they'd want me to put a wee green sign on the back door that says fire exit. Now, that is not a fire exit, it's a back door, right? And everybody that comes to the house knows, if there's a fire, you fuck off out the back door. Right? You don't go looking for fire exits. And the other thing we do that I believe we should be thinking about in services, when somebody comes to us to recover, to do the recovery journey, we employ them to recover. Right, that's their job. You know, we say it all the time, recovery is the hardest thing you'll do in your life and all that. And then we call it a service. It's not, it's a job. Because you have to work hard. You have to have a real structure. And you have to go at it day after day after day until you get it right. So our clients have a job when they come to us. Their job is to recover. Our job is to walk alongside them in that recovery. Our job, if you like, and if we look at the idea of psychiatry and psychotherapy and all this psychiatry stuff, psychotherapy, therapy, psyche, means soul. Therapy means midwife from the Greek. The psychotherapist, midwife of the soul. I don't know what you are. You might be a nurse, social worker, psychiatrist, art therapist, whatever, psychologist. But I tell you what, do you not think midwife of the soul sounds better? Yeah. I am a midwife of the soul. And the midwife, how many people have had a midwife? It'll only be women, by the way, okay? Okay. A midwife's job is to deliver the baby, isn't it? No. See, all the men are going, yeah. No, it's not. The woman delivers the baby. The midwife assists the woman in the journey and normally catches. Right? They're good at that. Right? In the same way, the midwife of the soul in a recovery house. Our job is not to deliver recovery. That's the client's. Our job is to assist on the journey of recovery. And in the recovery house, our clients start work at 9, right? Because that's what you do in the real world. And you feed the animals, right? Because there's a strange thing about animals. If you don't feed them, they get pissed off. Huh? Especially pigs. And they escape. And they are a nightmare to get back in, aren't they, Paul? Yeah. So at 9 o'clock you start. You feed the animals, you feed yourself, you sit and you have discussions. Clients keep journals. Clients are expected to work through their recovery path. We do individual work on voices or whatever the issue is. The whole day, 9 to 5, is work. You know, you go into a lot of services at 9 o'clock and the clients are still in bed. Well, you can't recover in bed. That's not where you recover. You recover in the real world. That's where you recover. And that means working at it. And until we instill, I would implore you to give every client a contract of employment. If you're a client of mine, you are employed to recover. And as your employer, my job is to ensure your health and safety, to do this, to do that, to do the next thing. I have responsibilities. Isn't that what the real world's about? Isn't that a possible future? You know, Mark Twain wrote, an expert's just some guy from out of town. Right? We're all experts. Why do we only ever listen to the guy from out of town? Why don't we listen to ourselves in here? You know, working in mental health is not a job, it's a privilege. We are privileged to serve. And I believe that in the recent years, we have lost the idea of privilege. We have lost the idea of service. You know, you don't come into this profession for the wonderful financial rewards and social kudos. We come in with a passion that we cannot afford to lose, a passion that we've got to maintain, a passion for recovery. I don't know anybody that came to work in mental health to keep their clients ill. Every person I know has come in to enable their clients to get their lives back. Well, let's do that. But let's do it by looking at systems that will work. And perhaps one thing that I would have loved John to have said, perhaps it's time to think the unthinkable. Perhaps it's time to take mental health out of health services and put it into the community where it belongs. To take it out. Because mental health is not just about illness and for people that are ill. Mental health is a fundamental human right for every single person in our society, including the 1 in 4 in this room that will have their own issues. It's our right to have mental well-being. It's not an add-on extra. It's a fundamental right. 3 weeks ago, we opened a recovery house in Italy, and Karen's been there. She flew in from Italy yesterday, and she's working there. And so I'm going to hand over to Karen, but thanks very much for listening.
It was lovely to hear the minister talk about hearts. I've not heard that from somebody at that kind of level before. I've often felt like a lone voice because I passionately believe that what we are missing in mental health care is heart. And what we do in the recovery houses is bring heart, reciprocity and passion, and dare I say it, the word love. The house in Italy is a little bit different. It's a partnership between us and a family association that were fed up with the care that they were receiving for their children in services. They were fed up of seeing their sons and daughters now getting older and older with no recovery in sight, and asked us if we would try and bring what we were doing at the recovery house in Scotland to them. So this one is paid. And the families are paying for it at the moment. We have trained staff. 2 of our interpreters have become recovery workers because they have shown a natural flair for the work. We've got a psychologist who hasn't been tainted by working yet as a psychologist, so she's absolutely perfect. We've got a retired psychiatric nurse who has more heart and passion now about mental health and recovery than he did in the whole of most of his working life. And in the last few years, he's been running Hearing Voices group, Stefano. And that is our paid workforce. And then we have volunteers. We've got 2 nurses who work full-time in a private other service who on the opposite shifts come and work for us for nothing because they're that passionate about wanting to learn. And I use their words. They're saying at the moment they feel schizophrenic, and what they mean by that is they're going to their job in the private bin is the best way to describe it, and they're having to follow all these rules, roles, procedures, things that they've got to do, and they're coming to us and they're finding it's almost like the exact opposite, and they're completely like, oh, you know, from this experience, but loving every moment of coming to the house. Again, it's based on a 9-to-5 work ethic. We start by going into the gardens at 9 o'clock for an hour. We've got a huge vegetable patch, which was only started 2 months ago on my first visit for over a weekend. And it's already giving us food for the house. After that, we do a lot of group work. On our first day, we ask the question, what does recovery mean to you? And we've got 2 particular people in the house who are still in quite an acute phase of psychosis. And one of them, who doesn't really speak outside the groups and tends to spend a lot of time in the garden, wandering around, talking to himself, turned round and said, recovery is a life with passion. The whole of the staff team and I'm feeling it now, just cried at that moment. You know, this is a guy who's only just beginning to connect, but knows that the deepest sense of himself what recovery is. On the last week, his psychiatrist visited for the day, and we were talking again about recovery. And he turned around, looked directly at his psychiatrist, and this completely came out of the blue. He just turned around to me, looked straight him in the eye, and said, "I want my life back." We have another guy, Matteo, who we worked with a while ago, and unfortunately, for various reasons, was taken off his medication rather too quickly by his father and became quite unwell. And we decided that we would still have him in the recovery house. And we tried our best for 4 or 5 days, but he was not talking. He was basically doing quite wandering off a lot, and we're right in the middle of the countryside, so it's very hard to keep somebody who won't do that. And we, even myself, who doesn't particularly like using medication, said he needs some medication. We tried some sleeping drafts, but it still wasn't effective. So in the end, we said, okay, let him go to hospital, just to see if we can get the, because we were not set up as an acute house. We're set up more for recovery. He went in for over the weekend. We visited on the Sunday, and we were so distressed by what we saw. This very horrible clinical ward, nowhere for people to congregate as a group other than a long line of chairs down a corridor. He was in bed, middle afternoon, flat out, fast asleep and drugged up. We thought, we've got to get him out of here. So 2 days later, Antonella, who was a translator, went back in and sat with him and said, "What do you want, Matteo?" Because he was speak to her. And he said, "It's boring in here." And he hadn't spoke to anybody else at all, but he said, "It's boring in here. I want to come back." So we arranged a meeting the next day, talked to the staff on the ward. "Oh, he's got mutism. And we haven't been able to manage to build a relationship yet with him, so we need to keep him here." So we went back to the services the next day and basically fought and said, "We want him back. You've got him on the medication now. Please let's have him back." They weren't going to until he turned around to Antonella, who was sat beside him, and started stroking her arm and looking at her. And they realised that there was no way they could form a relationship like that. They just weren't in the position to be able to do that, and they let him go. The first day he came back, we were still a little bit worried about wandering. We had a family meeting, and several of the families volunteered to spend an hour each that afternoon, early evening, with Matteo so that he was safe. By that evening, though, it was obvious that he was doing a lot better. So 4 of us took him and a few others right into town, where there was a huge big festa going on. That was all in medieval clothing and everything. And he sat with us, he stood with us, he went to the bar with us, acted absolutely appropriate. By the Monday, he was talking again. By the Tuesday, he was making, if anybody's been to Italy, they made these wonderful things with courgette flowers in batter. And he'd done a chef's course a few years ago. And with one of the boyfriends of one of our workers, who came in because he liked the place so much, he made battered zucchini flowers for all of us. This is just within 4 or 5 days of being with us. The last thing I'd like to say is, yes, we really needed to close down the institutions, but I think what we did as usual is we threw out the baby with the bathwater. The beauty of the institutions was the outside environment, and there is absolutely no way on earth that you can do real recovery and real acute work in an acute admission ward in the middle of a general hospital. The beauty of the farmhouse is that people can wander around. They can sit down on the grass. They can sit under a tree. We're holding all our groups at the moment, because it's so hot, under a tree in the middle of the garden. You cannot even begin to imagine how beautiful an environment that is to work with people. Okay, it's summer, and it might be different in the winter, but we're still surrounded by this beautiful environment that allows us to do everyday things with people. Finally, I just want to say a very quick thing, because I know you all want your coffee. We're talking about community, we're talking about community development and mental health. Please go out, get this film on DVD and watch it. If you really want to see what a community can do, it's a film. It's not it's a real film. It's called Lars and the Real Girl. Some of you might have already seen it. Lars, Lars and the Real Girl. It's all about a guy and his rubber doll. But it is a really brilliant example of a community coming around and holding a person through their journey of recovery. Thank you.